So we have it's a webinar and a seminar. We have 250 persons registered for the webinar part. So that's why we've started exactly on time. Though we could have started a little bit earlier if we were just this group amongst ourselves. So when you do ask questions or audience participation at the end, please use the microphone so that it goes out through the computers as well. So I'm Bruce Campbell. I'm the director of the CGIAR research program on climate change, agriculture and food security. We're working in some 18 countries on insurance, research-wise. But the focus today is really on Africa, and in particular Nigeria. And we've linked up with some South-South learning, and we've got the Indian insurance experience in the room as well today. We're going to focus on 3 issues in the panel. What are the successes that we've seen in the last few years? What are the challenges to moving those up to a mega scale? And then what are some of the innovations that can overcome those challenges? The format for the afternoon will be 2 very short presentations and then a panel discussion. And so without further ado, we'll start with Jon Hellin. He's from CIMMYT, the Maize and Wheat Centre of the CGIAR, and he'll give us a 5 to 7 minute introduction. Go ahead, Jon.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Good afternoon, everyone. Great privilege and pleasure to be here. We're certainly not going to have death by PowerPoint. I have all of 3 slides. As Bruce said, I work for the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Centre, CIMMYT, hosted in Mexico, but with operations all over the world, focusing on essentially crop breeding in maize and wheat-based farming systems and agronomic practices. And we're one of the centres that belong to the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, the CGIAR. In terms of setting the agenda for this panel discussion on insurance, and particularly under the theme of advances that can make a difference, I want to go back a tiny bit in time. We talk a lot about climate-smart agricultural practices, and one of the challenges we face is continued land degradation. The challenge of agricultural production productivity faced with in the face of land degradation is exacerbated by climate change. This picture was taken in Honduras in the 1990s when I was privileged, lucky enough to be working with funding by what was then the Overseas Development Administration, now of course the Department for International Development, on a research project looking at soil and water conservation on hillside farms, the sorts of slopes that were being farmed here. Now, in those days, a plethora of technologies were being developed. We called them soil and water conservation. I see a lot of them being relabeled and revisited under the guise of climate-smart agriculture. Nothing wrong with that. But we also face, and it's something that's of much consideration to CCAFS, the challenge of scaling up those technologies. And this is where the interest has arisen in crop insurance, and particularly crop index insurance, the extent to which it can mitigate one of the obstacles to technology uptake, which is risk. If you invest in buy inputs for your farm and then there's a drought and you don't get a harvest, you've got to pay back the loan, you've lost money, etc. So to what extent can crop index insurance or crop insurance mitigate those risks and encourage farmers to invest in their farms? There are challenges around developing scientifically validated crop insurance indices, and also indices which are affordable and attractive to different stakeholders, farmers, and of course the insurance and the reinsurance industry. But there are lessons, recent lessons from successful case studies. It would be well worth, I think this is handed out at the beginning, this has just come out, a CCAFS report which highlights some of these very interesting case studies, many of which are in Africa, from Senegal, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, which highlight some of the success stories vis-a-vis crop index insurance and the uptake of some of these climate-smart agricultural technologies. Now, working for CIMMYT, where the focus, as I said at the beginning, is very much on crop breeding and improved land management, conservation agriculture. One of the big initiatives we're involved in, with funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is drought-tolerant maize for Africa. And scientists and national partners, international scientists, have been developing a number of maize varieties which are tolerant, not resistant, tolerant to drought and heat. And whilst I know the focus of this meeting is on Nigeria, there have been varieties developed for Nigeria, but these are the ones for Southern Africa. We still face that challenge. Yes, we've got the germplasm, we've got the improved varieties out there. We're working with the seed companies on capacity building. But again, what can we use to overcome the bottleneck, the hurdle vis-à-vis farmer adoption of these technologies? And I think when it comes to technology uptake, when it comes to the exciting initiatives vis-à-vis crop index insurance, that's where we can actually come together and get great win-wins. So the key sort of message in the area of research that I'm looking at, and the message in question for the panel, is the extent to which the successful case studies that we've seen where crop index insurance has been bundled with key inputs such as improved germplasm, fertilizer, to what extent can that be part of the Nigerian government's portfolio as it seeks to ensure that its agriculture is climate smart? And I think that would be essentially the thing I would like to see the panel address, some of these questions as to whether this is a way forward or one of the ways forward for the Nigerian government. Thank you.
Good, thanks very much, John. And now Pramod will give some opening remarks. Pramod Aggarwal. Pramod is the regional program leader for CCAFS in South Asia. He's an employee of CIMMYT, another one of the CGIAR centers.
Thank you very much, Bruce. So the topic that I'm going to discuss, if I can get my slides on, is specifically, I think they are still trying to load. Yeah, okay, great, thanks very much. Crop insurance in India. So that's the example that I'm going to quote, because India is one of the most successful experiments so far about insurance. And how do we really scale out further? So before I make some suggestions, I would just like to quickly run down through some slides to show you the current insurance coverage in India. Today, we are covering more or less 30 million farmers. It's a really large number. In terms of area, it's about 44 million hectares that are already covered. So this seems to be a big number, but if you look at the size of India, the number of insured farmers still happens to be only 19%. So it's vast majority of farmers still remain uninsured. So that's why, what are the opportunities for us to scale out? Now, besides this 81%, even this 19% seem to be generally dissatisfied with the current insurance products. So there's a big strategy need here to how to retain them with the insurance sector. So this was a very important survey done some time ago by government, trying to understand what are the key reasons why farmers are somewhat dissatisfied. So what you see, this is more in context of weather-based crop insurance. The key reason was location of weather station. Every farmer wanted a weather station in his own farm so that we to consider the spatial variability. But also very important is, if you look at some of these other ones, we will not have time to go into this detail, but they all relate to insurance literacy. You know, farmers are not really very clear in terms of how exactly this insurance is working, the operational mechanisms, you know, there's huge challenges that they face. So those are some of the key issues that farmers feel are still not being addressed. And same farmers were also asked what exactly should be done so that their loyalty to insurance is retained for a longer period. So there are three major areas where they thought we need to work more. One is insurance literacy, communicating better with farmers so that they understand what exactly is the insurance program. Product design, so that should be somewhat easy to understand and should be site-specific. I think that's a great challenge for all of us, but easy to understand because lots of our products that we are trying to develop, especially weather-based, are often difficult for farmers to understand. And of course, site specificity is extremely important. So data in terms of weather, in terms of crop cutting experiments, and I'm sure later in the panel discussion, many of these questions will come back again. So I'm just going to propose 5 major points that where we feel innovations are needed, and that will really help us in scaling out better. First is in terms of product design. Although we have this weather-based crop insurance, several triggers are available, but yet they're fairly generic. Against one crop, you will have more or less one trigger for practically much of the country. So what we really need is much better standardization of these based on agroecological principles, based on crop models, statistical models, and a variety of other tools that are available to develop a more agroecological zone-specific and crop-specific trigger. So that's one challenge if we're able to address. Hopefully, we should be able to scale out further. The second one is that we should not really be seeing insurance as standalone most of the time. That's what we are trying to do. But if we can package insurance together with other risk management interventions, which Jon just mentioned, for example, drought-tolerant maize, and so on and so forth, also with water management, I think this will be much better for us to institutionalize, and perhaps acceptance of this will be much more in longer run. So CCAFS is a concept of climate-smart villages, where exactly that's what is being implemented at several sites in different countries. Again, we don't have time to go into details, but climate-smart villages basically is a participatory evaluation of a portfolio of interventions which are not only technology-related, but also with climate information services. Double trigger products not only talk about weather-based alone, but also link it with indemnity-based products. That's, again, something very useful. But above all, also quite important is how do we bundle them with other relief mechanisms? The governments have lots of schemes for disaster relief. Can we link all of these things together? So much more comprehensive strategy is something what is needed. But of course, while we try to bundle many things, it has to also remain simple. The next very important issue which has often come up, engaging farmers in product design. I think that's, again, a demand time and again that is often raised by farmers. And also not only just product design, but also in measurement, reporting, and verification of losses. I think that's quite important. So we are doing some pilots in India, trying to come up with a new innovation. How do we involve farming communities by themselves in designing, in measuring, and reporting, and verification of losses? I think together with the Agriculture Insurance Company, that's a new initiative that we have started recently in almost 50 villages. And more or less final point is ICT. It's a big power, and I'm talking much more in context of India. What we see, huge penetration of smartphones and tablets these days. Practically every farmer has a phone, and very soon he will have a smartphone, the way things are changing. Rural service centers, a variety of other services are being established. So some of this power can be really used to accelerate this whole insurance program and getting online policies, enrollment, crowdsourcing of farmers' practices, and digital images of crops which farmers can provide. And in the background, insurance stakeholders can compute losses. Key point, again, in context of India is this direct benefit transfers. So that really helps us in quick settlement of claims. What we have a new record, world record, 115 million bank accounts were opened in the last 6 months. You can imagine, and most of them happen to be in rural areas. So practically every farmer now, you can expect to be having a bank account. So it should be really possible to accelerate lots of this benefit transfer. And final point, which I would like to make, I think we really need to do much better targeting. So this is just an example of India to show where exactly are the risks. So this is in terms of rainfall deficit areas. What you see, red areas are where the probability of drought is very high. Almost more than 40% of years you will see drought, and the color becomes lighter, the probability is less. And if you look at the distribution of weather, this more or less distribution of agriculture insurance scheme, the beneficiaries are more or less evenly distributed right now. And of course, there are some data issues, but the point that I'm trying to derive at, perhaps it's more important for us to target only much more vulnerable areas rather than trying to do it all over. So quickly to summarize some of the key points that I just made, very important is improved insurance literacy. Farmers really need to understand that what exactly are these products. Much more focus on comprehensive risk management solutions, not to see insurance as a standalone approach. As much as possible, engaging farming communities. Of course, it will produce its own challenges and issues to be addressed. But as an experiment, we really need to understand if we can engage them to bring better confidence. And final point is the potential of ICT that it provides for scaling out for enrollment and also for quick settlement of claims. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Pramod. So we're doing very well on the timing. I think my threats to them have worked. We're now going to move into the panel. Julian Roberts is going to be the moderator for the panel. We couldn't have got a more experienced person in the role. Julian is the executive director of weather and agribusiness and weather division inside Willis Ray. He's also one of the architects behind the reinsurance of the Africa Risk Capacity Project. Yeah. So over to you, Julian.
Thanks, Bruce. I think I'm probably mic'd up already. I think it's time to convene our panel. There are 5 chairs laid out here. So if I can call upon our panelists to assemble. And maybe along the way I can introduce everybody as we go. So Joseph, ladies, I appreciate. I'm going down my list, so forgive me, Claire, if I do this. Can I introduce Joseph Plappallil from who is Chairman and General Managing Director of the Agricultural Insurance Company of India. Next up is Bashiru Martins. Please, Bashiru, if you could join us. Bashiru is Deputy General Manager of the Agricultural Insurance Corporation of Nigeria. Welcome. Thirdly, Mario Wilhelm from Swiss Re, if you could join us, please. Mario's Senior Microinsurance Specialist from the institutions at Department of Swiss Re, Vice President of Global Partnerships. At last, Clare Shakya, Climate Change Team Leader, African Regional Department at DFID. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Chirantan Bannerjee from GIZ. Forgive me if I don't attempt the whole German words. That would just be showing off. So we're going to try and put some structure onto this session, the next hour or so of questioning. And the topic, as you see, is answering the tough questions. I shall endeavour to deliver some of those, but clearly for at least half of the process, it's your turn to do likewise. And let's hope we can really drill down into some of the process, some of the challenges, and not least, of course, some of the successes that have been recorded in this area. And indeed, it's those 3 topics that we're going to be looking at, is starting at success, what's gone right, where we can be proud of what's going on, the challenges, and there's been some dark insinuation about where the challenges lie. There are others, I'm quite certain, so let's think about those. And thirdly, innovation. What is going to take us to drive this thing forward? What changes need to be made? What use can we make of technology? And so on. So let me turn straight away then to the start of that. And I'm going to turn my first question to Joseph. And I'm referring back to the key achievements that Pramod referred to in achieving scale in India. And to most of us, to think about reaching 30 million insured farmers is astonishing success. The fact that it is only 19% of the farmers that you could potentially reach seems incidental, but clearly that the challenge is there. But perhaps rather than looking at the challenge, could you perhaps tell us how you attribute the success in achieving the scale that you have achieved to date?
Yeah, if the single most important factor that has helped in scaling up is the strong government support that we have. One is in terms of subsidy that the government offers, and second is in creating the institutional mechanism to market these products. When they created an institution, a company exclusively for selling agricultural crop insurance initially, and where the subsidy came in the form of claims in excess of the premiums that the insurer was collecting. Subsequently, once the critical mass was there, large number of farmers joined, they have opened the market for the private companies, and from an administered mechanism, they've moved into an actuarial regime whereby the insurance companies pay the claims out of the premiums. So the government support, and as far as distribution is concerned, it's a major challenge to distribute crop insurance products, especially in rural areas in the country. So there are linkages with financial institutions which enable the insurance companies to market these products. Whenever a crop loan is taken by a farmer, automatically there is an insurance that is being sold to him. And that helps us to distribute and scale up and manage such a huge number of farmers at any point in time. The other issue is regard to assessment of loss. When you have yield-based programs, the yield is assessed based on crop cutting experiments, which are again done by government agencies. There are designated departments in each of the provincial governments who does the crop cutting experiments, based on which you are able to assess the loss and pay out claims. Because it would be very difficult to individually assess the loss in each of the farms. So we have this area-based approach and the CC based on sample plots, which has helped us to scale up and manage this huge volume of business.
Excellent.
I hope you have.
Thank you, Joseph, very much. And you speak there, I think, to a key theme which runs through this, and that is the level of support at government level for these programs and how that influences success. And by the way, I think although that's critical for both India and African nations and Nigeria, it's a global comment as well, and we'll probably hear more of that as we go along. Thank you. Bashiru, if I can turn to you for a second question. Jon spoke very eloquently about the opportunities and the potential for bundling products up, and is clearly very excited in that context for the opportunities for Nigeria. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about the challenges for the programme for 2015 and how you propose to deliver such an exciting programme.
Thank you. The program we have presently is the Planting with Peace program, which is bundled with the input support afforded by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to the rural farmers. The idea is bundling insurance with the inputs. We believe that in this year, 2015, under this synergy, about 6 million farmers will have insurance. The main idea is to deepen the insurance penetration among the rural farmers. So beyond the growth enhancement support program, which the program is leveraging on, we believe that other participants in the promotion of agriculture, I'm talking of NGO, donor agencies, banks, all these other people will have seen the simple approach of the Plan with Peace program, and some of them will have adopted the program. We will have achieved some mileage in supporting the farmers' education in the area of finance and technology. I'm talking of financial inclusion programs that we're all pursuing. I believe that by the end of 2015, we will have moved substantially from where we are now in the area of deepening the culture of insurance amongst the farmers. Farmers will have come to appreciate insurance as a potent risk management tool in agricultural program. Then you talk about these challenges.
We'll come on to challenges in due course. I think what we're looking at today is success, and clearly reaching 6 million farmers in 2015 will be a success.
Yeah, it's a technologically driven thing, and this has characteristics of speed, reaching so many at a time. We are considering that. It is also bundled, the insurance is bundled with irresistible input package being afforded by the Ministry of Agriculture. I mean, seed, fertilizers at a very cheap, subsidized cost. The approach is simple and it is transparent for all to see. The claim process too is predetermined that everybody can actually calculate on this day. So the transparency, the simple approach, the irresistible package, and of course the technology involved will drive the process.
Thank you, yes. So you speak there of a simple but effective and powerful technique of conjoining a technology package with insurance. So yes. Risk management comes together as one part of the whole thing.
That is the idea.
Yes, fascinating. Okay, thank you very much. Turning now, if I may, to Mario. And obviously, Swiss Re has been very deeply involved in the farming sector in Africa for very many years. To what do you attribute if there is indeed a recent upsurge in an interest in and a manifestation of agricultural insurance in African countries generally? What are the drivers that we see presently, and maybe what are the changes in the availability of insurance which your fund provides?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally Africa is not a big market for the insurance industry. But it was only back in 2012 when, under the Grow Africa initiative, which is under the World Economic Forum, our CEO gave a commitment to reach 1.4 million smallholder farmers by the year 2017. Now, interestingly, the World Economic Forum just ended last week, and we had the announcement that we have already achieved this number now. It's not just 1.4 million, it's 2 million smallholder farmers. And the reason for that is that we as a company are believing in Africa, we are investing in Africa. We assume that we are investing around $2 million per year in human resources to develop agriculture insurance in Africa. It's not just Swiss Re who's investing, it's also the governments, different government agencies, it's the international donor community, it's research organizations, NGOs, and I think they are all part of the puzzle. And I think the big success, and where we are seeing the successes also in India, is where different stakeholders come together. So to me, and it's something I want to highlight, one of the big success factors is really commitment and then collaboration amongst the different stakeholders.
Interesting. Obviously, insurance has been with us as part of social fabric, if I can call it that, for hundreds of years. Do you see that the technology of insurance that is available to us in recent times, developments, maybe availability of data, availability of infrastructure, computing capability, are these things which sort of effectively change what is an old product into something a bit new, which enables insurers and reinsurers to step up to the plate and be a bit more useful in this community? Is that a factor in your view?
It is, I think when we're going to speak about the challenges, technology is very important to overcome the challenges. But what we are seeing, and I mentioned before, that for a long time Africa was basically neglected by the international insurance industry. One reason for that is that the traditional insurance model simply doesn't work. Traditionally, you would have an agent selling an insurance policy to smallholder farmer. In times of a loss, in case of a big drought, you would have to send a loss assessor to the field to actually assess the loss on the ground. And that's very costly. I mean, it's a lot of kind of manual face-to-face processes involved on the point of sales, but then also for the claim settlement. And that's just simply not affordable for the smallholder farmers. So you have to look into technology in order to replace these manual processes by more digital processes.
Mm. Mm. Good. Thanks very much indeed. Let's broaden out a little bit here and pick up on a comment that Pramod made earlier, that insurance exists in the context of the development of the rural sector as well, as we're looking at it. And therefore the agenda is broader and very fundamental. And I'm thinking here of the role that both DFID and GIZ have played in this development of that, and the extensive work that you've done. So Clare, maybe I'd quickly turn to you. That DFID is particularly interested in the whole area of sovereign risk and rural development, and you've been prominent and preeminent indeed in making investments in that space. Perhaps, and also, the example of the African risk capacity, which I'm sure we'll hear more of as we go along. As we're talking about successes now, let's focus on those. Would you enumerate for us perhaps what and where some of these successes can be found?
Sure. I mean, for DFID, I guess we've been looking at risk in terms of small farmers for many years. But I think as we've had to begin to think through what climate impacts are going to bring about, a recognition that actually, if extremes are going to become more common, how are poor farmers and pastoralists going to manage to protect their assets to move out of poverty? So in thinking that through, we've begun to look at the range of instruments available to a country, trying to move out beyond humanitarian aid as being the only response to a drought or flood, and actually thinking about what mechanisms could be set up in country. And one of these is around social protection schemes that have been there for a while now, cash transfers, work-based schemes, but thinking about how they could be designed so they can flex in times of drought or floods. So Kenya, Ethiopia and Sahel, regions that we're working in which are trying to design these. But the opportunity, I think, with the Africa risk capacity, where Africa has set up a mutual insurance company protecting sovereign risk at beyond 1 in 5 events. So at the moment it's only got drought risk cover, and we've got 4 countries have currently got coverage. And we, DFID and KFW, in fact, capitalised this because we saw it as a way of helping countries to incentivise good risk management systems in country. And you need a range of instruments, and I think we see insurance, and indeed index-based insurance, as one of them. ARC itself has been set up as an index-based mechanism, and because of that it can make payouts in 120 days. So, you know, we're really looking at a much faster response capability than if we're reliant on actually looking at what impact it's had on yields. But we do, I think, in DFID see the importance of having a portfolio of instruments. And one of the issues for ARC is, in order to join, you actually have to have a contingency plan. The contingency plan needs to set out what you would do in event of a drought. One of the challenges we have is actually how few mechanisms countries have currently. So I think this debate is particularly important, because actually if we can encourage countries to put in place the mechanisms, then that could be something that ARC finances in years of bad drought, and acts, if you like, as a reinsurance approach for index-based insurance schemes, as one example. So that's one of what I see as an emerging success, but it's very early days, obviously.
Yes, and it's the case, is it not, that it's a very smart way of the UK government, and indeed the German government, to leverage an investment, because effectively you get much bang for your buck in terms of funding and providing the capitalisation from a new insurer, which is then effectively used many times over to do just what it's needed, not least of which promoting an efficiency and timeliness of response, which I think is very innovative here. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Chirantan, same sort of question to you, really. I think, if you don't mind me sort of duplicating it, but I mean, I think if I can give that a slant also, that the challenge that affects all of us is, of course, that we've got very large numbers of relatively small transactions, and of course there are always fixed costs attaching to the infrastructure and the institutional requirements of setting these up. What's a smart way what have been smart ways of delivering that into that particularly challenging environment?
Well, the example of Mexico comes to mind, where they have provided these services through fondos or other farmer cooperatives, and that is one of the lessons which we have taken when we work with our Nigerian colleagues, and we are trying to, and that is what I would suggest, that providing these services at a higher level of aggregation might be an answer, because wherever you go, one of the biggest problems facing participation is high premiums. That's what farmers keep on saying, and a part of the high premium is the high transaction cost. So we might have to start thinking about smart ways to bring down the transaction cost, and once you're providing these services at a higher level of aggregation, outgrowers, cooperatives, you name it, a lot of transaction is done by these institutions, whereby the cost goes down, and there's also a portfolio effect, whereby the risk goes down and thereby the premium too. So as a result, at the end of the day, the premium goes down for the farmer in total, and it becomes more attractive for them to participate in these things. So I guess for success, for sustainable success, we need to look at higher levels of aggregation for implementation of these products.
And the fondos in Mexico have been around for many years and are a good exemplar of how that can be made to work. Of course, it places on those institutions, the fondos or the cooperatives or whatever it is, an obligation to get it right, because the success of the scheme is then
owned
dependent
by
upon
the members.
Exactly, and the fair distribution of both cost and benefit amongst those institutions it remains in their hands. And you're right, insurers very often at arm's length and may be ill-equipped to take those sorts of decisions without the appropriate infrastructure on the ground.
Actually, quite interestingly, when we were doing the risk diagnostics in Nigeria, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of the rice millers, they said we would gladly do it, and we would undertake these transaction costs and underwrite a bit of the risk, but it would be good for us if you provided us these services, and we would gladly pass these services on to the farmers. So there is a willingness out there.
Interesting, very good. Good. Okay. Well, I think in that session we've heard something of the successes that are known about, and there are many others. But crop insurance, agricultural insurance, globally is not without its challenge and detractors. Indeed, in some areas, not everybody believes it's a universal good. And certainly when you come to the concept of index-based insurance, where there may be quite a serious economic mismatch between what is actually paid out and what the farmer perceived to be his loss. So these design challenges and efficacy challenges are clearly something we all need to address. Clare, if I may, I turn to you. You've spoken about your role, the support for the African risk capacity, and the workings at a sort of a larger level, a sort of meso level. What are the challenges, therefore, in delivering that and making sure that it actually delivers at the ground level to the sorts of people we're all trying to reach?
Well, I guess the biggest challenge is what I was touching on earlier, having a comprehensive risk management portfolio in country that ARC can back. You know, there has to be a plan that makes sense in response to a drought that ARC can underwrite. And getting a portfolio that reaches the right people, the right time, with the right type of support is difficult. And we tend to see patches. So you've got one type of approach in one bit of a country and another in another. And what we need is actually layering of a range of approaches. And then there's the issue of using index-based approaches. We've got basis risk, and we need to invest in climate information so that we can begin to improve the triggers, if you like, for these insurance schemes. And it's another area that DFID is investing in and is particularly difficult, I think, in a lot of Africa. And then the issues that have been touched on already around cost and sustainability. I mean, I think the opportunity perhaps with climate finance and mechanisms like ARC is to try and bring down the cost of premiums to the individual. So with ARC, KFW and ourselves capitalised the mechanism so that the cost of the premiums was reduced for the African countries. Within limited budgets, it's still difficult to pay. But actually, if we could use ARC to further underwrite insurance schemes down to the farmer and the pastoralist level, then we'll begin to see their costs also reduce, which I think will be one way of making these schemes more sustainable. And the other is just to stand back and say, well, when we're talking about these schemes and we're looking at sustainability and the criticism that they've relied heavily on subsidy in countries like India, we're actually recognising the value of using an insurance mechanism rather than humanitarian or an alternative as a way of reaching farmers. So I think the sense that there should be no subsidy, I'd sort of rather challenge that slightly in the days of climate change, where we're saying these types of extremes are going to increase, and how do we protect farmers and pastoralists? And actually, what we perhaps need to do is begin to quantify what level of underwriting is required from climate finance in order to reduce the need for humanitarian aid.
I mean, you referred again to cost, as we all do. Is not one of the challenges, well, it is in my view anyway, one of the challenges also to be able to articulate the benefit that goes with it.
Indeed.
It's very easy to see the cost. It's a premium figure, and probably no one's got that in their budget at the moment. But humanitarian
responses are incredibly expensive. So I just wonder whether if we began to compare these instruments, we might not say that actually this is in fact value for money.
Yes, indeed. and there is a benefit and a credit to be attached to the timeliness of delivery. In other words, a stitch in time saves 9. If you get money in within 120 days as opposed to 18 months, that's probably going to be a good thing. Yeah. Good. Quickly, sort of an extra question. You mentioned DFID making investment in acquiring or enhancing access to data. Data is a question which runs through all of these topics, getting access to good, timely data at scale that matters. In the case of ARC, it relies on satellite-derived data, remote sense data, which is fabulously effective. Are you aware of other initiatives that are enhancing that process?
In DFID, we've been supporting something called CLIMDA for some years, which has been, it was very much just very early piloting, working with a few countries at relatively small scales, but trying to, for example, begin to digitise weather information from the last 100 years or so, depending on the country. That all that information is there in the Met offices, but it's stacked in paper form on shelves. So getting that digitised, rescued is the terminology, and beginning to look at what sorts of level of investment would be needed in a country to improve their climate observation. We're now looking at scaling that up and just in the process of designing, but looking at a significant increase in investment.
Right. Thank you. Chirantan, GIZ is renowned for its activities and operations in the general resilience piece, of which we consider in this discussion insurance to be part. What are the challenges in linking these two together and making sure that agricultural insurance delivers to that agenda?
Well, the challenges are many, as Clare just pointed out, and the usual suspects would be mentioned by my colleagues. But I really want to highlight one thing, one challenge, which is often not discussed, and that's the supply-side impediment. And in my professional and academic life, I've seen and talked to many insurers, and they say that, well, first of all, I'm not saying what is good or bad. It's just to bring the fact on the floor. And that is that the reinsurers, for obvious reasons, can provide only quota share reinsurance program, which is, in simple terms, that the insurer has to transfer part of the premium collected, with which the risk is also getting transferred to the reinsurer. The insurer doesn't have much risk, and the insurer gets a commission to run its day-to-day business. This is a supply-side impediment, I call it, because the insurers remain in business as long as there is donor support or government support and whatever. Once these things are removed and the insurance program is supposed to sustain itself financially by itself, the insurers don't show any interest anymore because the cash flow is not really that big enough because of the quota share. And it is not something good or bad again. The thing is that the government should acknowledge the fact that there is this problem, and Clare actually told us a lot about the activities of the ARC, and this goes in this direction. And Joseph will be able to tell you about this at length. If the government gives smart subsidies, take the first losses, like in case of India they're having this claim subsidies, then it makes much easier for the reinsurance industry to provide them stop-loss insurance, reinsurance contracts to the insurance companies, which are more attractive for them from a business point of view. So I think this is a problem that we should also look at, because if we don't, then this supply-side problem remains, and the main organization which provides these products, the insurance company, nobody asks them what interest they have or not. And this is also something we should look at.
All right. So the challenge is subsidy. Is somehow getting
smart subsidy. Smart is the word.
Yes, because there can be some very unsmart subsidies as well, as we've also seen examples. And you draw an interesting distinction there also between the form of reinsurance that is available, not to get too technical, but proportional, non-proportional reinsurance which is available. And in the former case, of course, it is the local insurer that bears all the costs. Well, in each case, it's the insurer that bears the costs of running the insurance program. So where those costs fall and how they are shared may well be critical to the success, indeed the longevity of the insurance programs. Yeah, good, thank you. Let's turn to our industry specialists now, if I may. And Joseph, just picking up on that thing, criticisms of subsidies, they are criticised, they're also essential. We all know that. Are these subsidies, as Chirantan says, critical to overcoming these challenges that we're facing, or are they just a necessary component, effectively, of developing a national program?
In a country like India, where everything from A to Z is a priority, allocation of resources is always a challenge. But in case of agriculture, it involves food security. About 50% of the population's livelihood depends on agriculture. So there's no way the government can ignore agriculture. So as I said, issue is targeting the subsidy. Is it going to the right set of people? So I think the government will be looking at that, ensuring that the right set of people get subsidy. But I don't think withdrawal of subsidy is a solution in the given circumstances. And from insurance perspective, I doubt very much if it will survive without subsidy at this point in time.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's both at government and state level, insurance is therefore seen as a public good, as a means of supporting the agricultural sector and perhaps de-risking it and maintaining livelihoods in the rural sector. So what you're saying there is, I guess, that it becomes entirely tied up with the economics of the rural sector, and therefore you can't peel them apart. And by the way, it's important to mention that this is not associated just with emerging economies. The program, the North American insurance program, the multi-peril crop insurance program in the US, is subsidized to the tune of something like 65%. So it's massively subsidized. I was going to ask you, Joseph, what are the subsidy levels typically found in various state to state?
60%.
Same sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. The same is true in Europe, not quite such high levels, but subsidies of programs seems to be something which is impossible to get away from. Conversely, in countries where there is no insurance subsidy, Australia, you might accept, very, very agricultural economy, the take-up is really very low, so it's sort of a self...
If you're able to scale up further, and then if the entire 120 million gets covered, possibly the rates could come down.
Right.
It's a lot of numbers. So in that case, maybe the subsidy levels can come down. Not at the aggregate level, but at the farmer level, it can come down.
Good, thank you. Bashiru, turning to the Nigerian experience, you mentioned subsidies before, so perhaps I won't dwell on those now, but we're talking here about challenges. There are many. How would you prioritise the challenges that you face for 2015 and beyond?
Well, the challenges have been there, and we are trying to overcome it. Majorly, it is the literacy level of the farmers and the farmers' apathy to insurance. Majority of the farmers, the small-scale farmers, consider the insurance premium as unnecessary inputs, production inputs cost. That is a challenge. And this is where I will advocate for the continuity of the premium subsidy until we are able to nurture the agric insurance and the farmer to that equilibrium level that everybody will be at par. Another challenge is the issue of confidence amongst the farmers. That's, hey, you're taking my money now. When it happens, will you pay? When will you pay? Will they pay? I still see this part as part of the literacy issue. Another major challenge that confronts the insurance growth amongst the farmers is the competition the insurance has with other forms of subsidies, other government supports. Like in the event of natural disasters, we have the National Emergency Agency coming to the aid of the farmers. So the question is, government wants us to do agriculture, and if anything happens, government will pay us. Why do I need to do insurance? This is a major issue. The issue, of course, illiteracy, and of course, the doubts, the skepticism about insurance. These are the challenges. But what we are doing in Nigeria is to go all out to the farmers, meet them as groups, meet them through their facilitators, the lending institutions, to address them, to sensitize them on the need for insurance, for them to know their rights and all this. And it's getting better now, especially with the import of the technology. The interaction between the insurer, the bankers, and the farmers is getting better and faster. And these some doubts are being cleared up.
You mentioned a very interesting fact here, where what apparently appears to be a beneficial and disciplined approach to risk management, which insurance brings, as against the ad hoc and maybe not necessarily so disciplined approach of disaster relief in the post hoc, effectively speaking. And you're right, if that can crowd out what would otherwise be an effective mechanism, that's deleterious to development. So, yeah. And that, again, not unique to Nigeria. We've seen that in many other economies. An inconsistency of messaging, I would suggest, at certain levels are not so joined up. Thank you. Mario, we speak of the role that reinsurers such as Swiss Re play in supporting these mechanisms, and your firm is at the forefront of that, a very large participant in the reinsurance program for the African risk capacity, for example. So we know it can work. We know that it can come. What are the challenges that you see for scaling this up in both other nations, other continents, other sectors, given what we've seen today?
A very good question, and a lot of the challenges have been addressed. One of the main challenges I'm seeing, and I noted actually down 3 A's for the challenges we are seeing, and the first A would be access. How do we make sure that the smallholder farmer gets access to insurance? And I mentioned before that traditional way of selling insurance doesn't work in Africa because it's simply too expensive, too high of transaction cost. Excuse me, we have to change that. And we can change that by looking in alternative ways of getting insurance to the farmer. So maybe not on an individual level, but maybe on an aggregated level. It has been mentioned before that agricultural insurance is bundled with microfinance loans, so working with the microfinance institutions. There are also examples where we bundle agricultural insurance with inputs, seed and fertilizer, for instance, or on the output side with the outgrowers. So that would be all on the meso level. You could also think of agricultural cooperatives that we work on that level instead of working with individual farmers. But it goes all the way up. I mean, micro, meso, and also macro. And the government could play a role. So the African risk capacity example is a very good one, where different governments join forces and take responsibility and actually take out an insurance mechanism as a tool in their disaster risk financing toolbox. So it's access. The second A I've noted down would be affordability. We have discussed it already. The insurance, we call it the production chain, so the transaction cost is very high. So we have to change the way we are doing business for the smallholder farmers in Africa. So we have to bring the costs down. There are a lot of manual processes, paper-based processes. Maybe we can digitize them. There are a lot of cash-based transactions, that money is still collected, someone has to bring it to the bank and so on. That creates a lot of cost. Maybe then can be brought down, and there are very, very good examples in Kenya, for instance, where M-Pesa is used as a payment mechanism, a digital payment mechanism. So a lot can be done, actually, and ICT is a very, very hot topic here. And the last A is awareness. I mean, if you ask a random farmer in Africa, do you know what insurance is? Do you think it's a great product? Probably the farmer would say no, because it's not properly socialized. People don't know what the value of insurance is. There's oftentimes a negative perception, and we have to change that. That's a task for an industry, but it's also a task for all the other stakeholders, be it the governments and the donor community.
Great, thank you, Mario. I love the structured organisation, the 3 A's. We can remember that. Bruce tells me you're being too interesting and we're overrunning, so we've got innovation as our third topic. So I'm going to try and get through this, not to cut it short, but quickly, so we've got time for some questions. And Chirantan and Bashiru, I'm going to take you two together. In terms of innovation, the thought of bundling perhaps being an innovative process, the use of ICT to achieve that. Perhaps just one word about innovation as you would both see it. Bashiru, if I could ask you first.
Well, beyond bundling insurance with credits or inputs, we need to look at the agriculture from an holistic angle, the value chain angle. The pre-production activities need to be looked into, and I think Nigerian government is doing something in that area. That is in the realm of providing quality high variety seeds, fertilizers, and the like. There is need to address the post-harvest activities such that so that the farmers don't just produce in vain. It should facilitate the off-takers, the storage, the transit, and the processing aspect, which needs to be fixed. Another thing we need to do seriously is farmers' education. Sensitize farmers to accepting towards technology in their activities. Financial education is very important for the farmers. And of course, there is need for orientation of the farmers to be business focused, rather than taking business as one of those things, but it should be a business. I believe that taking it as a business, all things that needs to come into business will come into the farmers. And introduction of youths, attracting the youths to agriculture is very key. We should strategically work at letting the youth see agriculture as a means of employment, as business, as vocation, such that the continuity, the production, the adaptability to technology and the like, financial literacy is already with the youth, and all this can be enhanced beyond bundling, beyond insurance. These are my things.
Thank you. Excellent. Chirantan, a word from yourself on innovation.
Well, innovation is the way forward. And, well, I could just tell you something about what we did in Nigeria back in October, November. We had a risk diagnostic mission over there, and we went in with a very open mind. We didn't know what we were going to do, where we are going to do. We just wanted to listen to people, what they have to say, and then come up with innovative products, whatever is best suited. And after talking to all these stakeholders along value chains, from farmers to state-level organizations, Bashiru included, we came up with a binary product for at a high level of aggregation, at off-takers, seed growers, millers, that level, using ICT platform. And we would also suggest that these products should be promoted with, again, smart government support, where the government supports things like data availability in terms of weather data, setting up weather stations, promoting financial literacy, as Mario highlighted, subsidies, claim subsidies or first loss subsidies, whatever you may, such discussions can go on. So this is what we think is best suited for the value chain which we looked at Nigeria. But we have to keep in mind that there is no end-all, be-all one solution for everything, and we have to go in with open minds, not knowing what we are going to do, and then tailor-make solutions to best fit the situation.
Excellent, thank you. Mario, Joseph, innovation is technology and engaging with the youth the way forward?
It's true. Given India's size and the numbers that you deal with, I think that's the only way forward. Take, for example, the yield-based schemes. If you go with the group of villages as the reference unit area for insurance, we have to do as many as 1 million crop cutting experiments in a year. Now, that is going to be a major challenge. If you want to do it with the kind of rigor that which should be done, it's just not going to happen. So we need to use technology, remote sensing technology, to optimize the number of crop cutting experiments. So that is something which we need to do. Second is digitizing the land records. Some states have done it, others are on the way of doing it. Once we have land records which are digitized, when it is linked with the core banking solutions of the institutions, we should be able to capture more farmers into the insurance network. So from these two angles, I think it's important that we start leveraging technology.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mary, is innovation one of your A's?
It is a tool to overcome those challenges, I would say. And we have addressed them. I mean, innovation is quite important. A lot has been done. And I have to mention, I grew up on a small farm in Germany. So my father is a farmer. But satellite-based insurance, weather index insurance, is unheard of. I mean, if I explain him what it is, he doesn't understand. So the innovation is already happening, and it's happening in countries like India and also in Africa. And what we are seeing, and hopefully seeing, is a reverse innovation, that this innovation is coming back to Europe and North America. But still, you know, a lot can be done in order to bring, what I mentioned before, the transaction cost down. So innovation is the way forward.
Interesting. Claire, can you wrap up that for us?
Well, I guess we've all spoken about the importance of co-design, and I guess that is one of the key areas, is that we bring those exposed to the risk, the farmers, the pastoralists, and work through with them what sets of products that they need. And we look to how to bring down the costs. And I guess from my side, sitting on the climate change financing side, it would be really useful to begin to understand actually what types of levels of climate finance could help these schemes really begin to reduce their costs. If we recognise that certain extremes are going to be more common because of climate change, can we actually access that climate finance for subsidising, underwriting some of these programmes, and continuing to keep that focus on the timeliness of response. You know, if we let farmers have to sell their main assets, then they're starting from scratch again. They can't take up new technologies, and the length of time we're going to have to be supporting them to get them out of poverty will be much greater. So I think it's in everyone's interest that we really begin to tackle this.
Sounds like analytics is one of your A's.
Yes, yeah. I think so.
Very good. There we are. We've come to the final part of those three topics. And Bruce, I think I'm right in saying we've got some questions both from the audience and from online. I don't know how we wish to take those. Vita, you've got...
You can direct them and we'll take the mics around.
Okay. Right, question here.
Thank you very much. Michel Lavolée, Public-Private Partnerships Europe. I support the work of an SME Austrian-based providing weather data in most of the projects in Africa, including the Kilimo Salama project, but many more, and also the Mexico project on agriculture with the 1,200 stations that are there. I think it's important to remind ourselves that the India penetration of index insurance has taken a few decades. It's not overnight, it's not just over the last 3 years. And one of the core infrastructure elements is that there are 8,000 weather stations in India to provide real-time data. So my question to you and my plea is that there needs to be a better use of the existing tools. But for Africa, also being smart is not replicating what was not done in Europe or systems that were archaic and with more obstacles than opportunities. In Africa, there's a real opportunity to develop smarter systems for providing real-time data, which is usable, and working with the cell phone companies to make that data available and usable, but also for securing the payments. I think that Africa represents a huge opportunity to have these smarter systems in place within a relatively short period of time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Sarah Park of World Fish, CGIAR. I was delighted to hear about this idea of bundling, where crop insurance would be bundled together with climate-smart technologies. And I was even more delighted to hear Mr. Bashiru Martins suggest that in that bundle would also be a component about financial knowledge generation, so that farmers have the capacity to be able to pick up these products and use them to their best advantage. I'd like to suggest there's another thing that goes into a comprehensive risk management solutions bundle that's been talked about. And this is about existing approaches to risk management that already farmers operate on. Now, these kind of soft insurance approaches might be things like drawing on their social networks, drawing on their existing diversity in the region, their local knowledges, their local practices. So what I'd suggest that's in this bundle is a sympathetic approach to existing insurance strategies that farmers use, so that the best opportunities can be drawn from both the technologies, the climate-smart technologies, the insurance products themselves, but also the existing knowledge and strategies that farmers have.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, Sam Bickersteth from the Climate Development Knowledge Network, CDKN. I'd be interested in the panel's view, and Clare in particular, on the relationship between the obvious requirement for long-term public subsidy and the role of climate finance. You did allude to this, Clare. The Green Climate Fund is actively forming. Countries will be preparing their own positioning to be ready to receive climate funds. But are developing countries placing the costs of these kinds of exciting and innovative mechanisms in the bundle, in the basket of options for GCF funding? Because if they're not, so where is this long-term subsidy going to come from?
Chris Brown from UNICEF. Thank you all of you for your amazing insights into the work you're doing. And whilst we're not leading on agriculture, I think it touched on one of the slides that talked about climate-smart villages, and we're really interested in rural adaptation and resilience for the communities where farmers come from. And I think the bundling approach is really interesting, where we can see if governments are subsidising other elements of insurance and social protection and social resilience coming in, because the stresses and strains on farmers doesn't just include if the crops are coming in, it's whether their children are getting an education or access to healthcare, or if there's water in the area. And I would also like to just ask if some of the successes have been demonstrated, as the slide here with Takaful on his receipt shows, which is a mutual product that's linked to Islamic finance. Actually, mutuals and cooperatives are one of the solutions for an agility of both low-cost premiums and payouts, because 120 days at sovereign level is amazing, but there are many examples that we've witnessed in, say, the Philippines of a matter of hours, if not days, to get claims paid out, and these are small amounts. So thank you very much.
Gentleman there.
Hello, my name is Adrian Fenton. I'm a university researcher currently conducting research in Bangladesh on how climate change affects the microfinance sector as a whole. In Bangladesh, there are a lot of farmers who are vulnerable to climate change. However, many of these farmers are landless, and instead they work as labourers on other people's land. Landless households are among the most vulnerable to climate change, especially since their main livelihood, their labour, is lost during times of drought or shock. So should these types of households also be able to buy index insurance in order to protect themselves?
I think we better have an opportunity to answer some of these questions, otherwise I just act as statements. So I don't know if any of you would like to sort of self-volunteer. Claire, first question was addressed at you. Perhaps you would want to have a comment.
Well, I know that one country, Mongolia, the government has deliberately taken on a certain level of risk in the insurance mechanism they have. So the pastoralist, if the event is more than, I can't remember what one in year event it is, the government will pay the payouts. So I guess that's the role that I see Africa Risk Capacity, which is supported by climate finance, playing in these countries in Africa. I would, and one of the thoughts that I have is that actually in helping countries think through the package, the portfolio of risk finance mechanisms that they need, maybe we need a process around that so we can begin to identify actually what proportion of this we could say is climate risk and they're related to climate change and therefore payable from the Green Climate Fund. I mean, that's precisely, I suppose, where I see the direction going, Sam. Yeah. Okay. Just very briefly on the issue around traditional coping mechanisms, I completely agree with you. There are some fantastic systems out there. I think one of the problems, though, is that and Bangladesh is a fine example of this, is how that falls apart in a severe drought or a severe flood. So I wouldn't say that we can rely on them. They're much better on a health risk than on a drought risk if it's a severe event. So I think we should recognise that they exist, look at how we can support them, and indeed look at the role that mutuals and cooperatives can play in that. But they're just part of the package.
Anyone particularly taken with one of the questions? Access, for example, to...
Well, I see all the comments as adding value to what we're doing here. And by way of advice, all this we've noted. But I want to mention that in the aligning the technology to existing knowledge and products, I want to say that that's where we are taking technology in Nigeria. We are aligning technology to our existing products, the existing customers, existing clients. That is exactly what we are doing. It's actually adding value to what we are doing. It's not as if we are bringing in an entirely new concept. We are just making it easier for ourselves and for wider reach, wider appreciation. That's what we do. Thank you.
One of the hanging questions was, are index-based products suitable for landless farmers? I would suggest the answer to that is yes. One of the benefits, perhaps, of an index-based program is just that. I don't know whether anybody else has any comments.
I don't know of any schemes focusing on the landless, but no, it's certainly an area for future innovation.
Yeah, it's the way that you might do it. We've time for... Sarah, you had another question, I think. And someone I did. Oh, I've got lots of...
Sarah Park again from World Fish. I think the conversation has been implicitly about crops and livestock, and yet we know that millions of poor people rely on fish for nutritional and food security. And I'd just like to put the question out there for that, what do you see the possibilities for index-based insurance, focusing on those people where fish is their predominant means of their livelihood, in a way that would reduce their poverty and food security?
Challenging question. Anybody before I volunteer? Mario.
We have been discussing now in this panel weather index insurance, so mainly risks related to extreme weather events. So the question is, would the farmer be affected by an extreme weather event? He might be impacted by other event, by other risks. And there are different insurance programs in place, be it in aquaculture, for instance, that your fish die. So there are all kinds of different insurance solutions. But it would be a subject on its own, I would say.
So yes, in theory. Aqua is another A.
Aqua is another A.
Yeah, good.
Also challenging.
There is...
Please go ahead.
Well, I'm not very sure of all the details of the program, but I have had experience of reading something about El Nino, surface temperature anomaly indexed insurance for fishery, which makes a lot of sense for South American, the west coastal areas where fishery industry is greatly influenced by El Nino, the surface temperature, in El Nino 3.4 or 3 area. And such a thing exists, although I'm not very sure. I can't give you the details right away.
I can. Okay.
Sorry. I just want to make some comments in that area. The weather index thing, it's relatively new to us. What we're trying to do in Africa is move beyond pilot operations there and upscale it. And we have to start from an angle, and that is where we take crop. In Nigeria, the new product we have just rolled out for the crop farmers, I want to tell you that non-crop farmers, livestock farmers, aquaculture, they are already asking to be included because they also get government support. Where the crop farmers get support in the area of seed, fertilizer, the livestock farmers get support, the cattle farmers get salt lick and other things. The poultry farmers get support in terms of day-old broilers and the like. The fish farmers get support in terms of fingerlings and feed. But we don't want to rush things. The success of one will lead to the next one. And I believe by the time the study continues, as it is continuing, weather index may be applied to this other area.
Great. Okay. Question?
Yes, thank you. My name is Thomas Wiechers. I also happen to work for GIZ. Much of the discussion on index insurance is usually put in the context of loss of agricultural production or livestock. I think another important angle to it, and also possibly a link to climate finance, is looking at how index insurance could insure or enable investment in agriculture, particularly in climate-smart agricultural practices, or in generally in capital investment that then benefits farmers. One example would be irrigation mechanisms, or possibly even hydropower generation, which then makes electricity more accessible and particularly cheaper to farmers. And hydropower obviously depends on rainfall and water flow in the through the hydropower dam, and as such is very much dependent on the weather. And there are examples of index insurance against a shortfall of water flow, with the particular aim of reducing the dependency on more costly energy production mechanisms. And that then would enable farmers to have access to cheap electricity. For irrigation mechanisms, it would ensure that the operational risks involved in operating such irrigation mechanisms are covered. So it would actually encourage investments and not only ensure the loss of crops or livestock, in fact.
Excellent point. In the interest of, we've got some questions online. Alexa's going to read them out.
From the online audience, Chandi asks if the panel has any reflections or studies on how female farmers access crop insurance and whether insurance can be a key risk management strategy for female-headed households.
Thank you. Interesting question. Gender-based directionality for insurance. Anybody got some experience on that? Joseph, I mean.
In Nigeria, I think there's we give so much attention to farmers, to women in the area of agriculture, to the extent that every facility, a certain percentage is always devoted towards women and youth. Now, when we're talking of agriculture and the application of weather index or other forms of insurance to help agriculture, there is no discrimination against the women. Rather, they get more support from governments.
Joseph, in India, do you?
There's no special scheme as such for women, but anyone who grows a crop and he or she owns land or is a tenant farmer is eligible for insurance. So in India, the property generally devolves to the male, but even a female who is cultivating she can buy insurance, and she's eligible for the subsidies like anyone else.
Mario, from the microinsurance point of view, I've heard it said that often microinsurance schemes are very well focused towards women leaders. Is that something you've experienced?
Exactly. There are a lot of microfinance institutions that have a special focus on lending to women. Of course, there are many different insurance programs in place. It's not just agriculture insurance. There's also health insurance, life insurance. And of course, those products are targeting, in a way, women only. Exactly. But again, basically, insurance client, we don't discriminate by gender, but it's possible, why not?
Good. If there are no more questions, I think then we are getting towards how we've got 5 minutes. I was going to ask you each, if I may, it's a little unfair, but perhaps to leave us with a very brief take-home comment. How are we doing? What do we need to do to face up to delivering these resilience mechanisms to farmers? I'm just going to run down. Ladies first. Claire, if you could give us a thought.
I suppose to go back to the idea that we need to work with countries to develop a portfolio of mechanisms, both bundled and specific. We need the index-based insurance. We need social protection mechanisms that can flex. We need to use climate-smart technologies to reduce the exposure to risk. We need the whole portfolio, and we need to develop those portfolios actually. With the farmers, the pastoralists, the female-headed households, those in that very vulnerable bracket. And in developing that, I hope that the climate finance can also help push the incentives in the direction of getting risk management right.
Thank you. Excellent. Joseph.
Yeah. In India, we have achieved a certain scale, but then there are challenges in terms of if you ask farmers, there's a lot of dissatisfaction among the farmers with the product and the payouts that they are getting. So I think when we develop these schemes, there's a need to consult the farmers, understand their requirements, and keep more tweaking the product so that ultimately we are able to give them the kind of product that they're really looking for. So I mean that is something. It's not that you do it once and that is the end of it. It's a constant, endeavor to fine-tune the product to meet the need of the farmer.
Dynamic approach. Thank you, Chirantan.
So for me, it would be like. Well, go in with an open mind, have a look at the situation over there. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, so you have to tailor-make it to fit into all situations. And I've found the value chain approach particularly effective. So have a look at the entire value chain. Of course, have a focus on the smallholders, which is also from GIZ point of view very important, and that is what we do. But the solutions could be offered at any nodal point along the value chain as long as the benefit at the end of the day trickles down to the smallholders. And at this point of time, when there is a lot of nudging required at the smallholders level, I personally think that it might also be a solution to the fact that if the smallholders are allowed to reap the benefits of insurance before we actually go to them and provide them these services directly, because now we go and try to teach them what insurance is, and they're like pretty abstract. I mean, they have no idea what we're talking about. So if they are reaping the benefits of having this service, and then we go and start talking to them, they might, put everything in context, start putting in context and showing greater interest. And from the government side, as I always said, we need smart support. Things that the private or the insurance industry cannot do, weather stations, financial literacy, subsidies, and so on. That would be the take-home message from my side.
Thank you. Thank you. Sherry, what can you offer us?
I don't want to repeat all that's been said, but the fact is the common denominator amongst us, everybody, is food and food security. It is important that beyond our personal, professional interests, let us come together, let us collaborate, let us pool our ideas, our knowledge together to help agriculture so that agriculture will address, let's use agriculture to address the social issues That is my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mara, it's always the hardest being last. Everything's been said, but I'm sure you've got a wise word for us to summarise.
Yeah, I mean, my key message would be that in order to make agricultural insurance sustainable, we have to achieve scale. So you have to think big, because it's about the law of large numbers. So in a way, we have to move away from this thinking in small pilots towards thinking much bigger. So that's my key message.
Super. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the panel session, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for fantastic interventions. I think actually we've ranged right across the subject in depth and with great insight. So, Mayor, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure now to hand over for the closing remarks to Dr. Débísí Àràbà, who is the team leader in the Environmental Climate Change Unit in the Office of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development in Nigeria. Thank you, Débísí.
Thank you very much, Julian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. It was an excellent panel discussion. Thank you very much, Bruce, for helping to facilitate this event. Thank you very much to CCAFS and everyone who's come. I think, first of all, we'd like to reaffirm what we're trying to do here. Agriculture is a business. We see it as a business. We see every single smallholder farmer investing in agriculture with the aim of turning a profit. And if it's a business and not a development program, then it behoves us, the government, to ensure that the entire sector is, every single smallholder farmer is able to cope with the shocks and stresses of climate change. And not just cope, but bounce back to productive levels and remain productive. We've explored a plethora of options in ensuring that we build resilience into agriculture in Nigeria or across Africa. We've looked at the ARC, the African Risk Capacity. We've looked at weather index insurance. There's also the Planting with Peace program that the Agricultural Insurance Corporation of Nigeria is implementing. We have a database of over 10 million farmers with their biometric information, the locations, the farms, the size of their farms, and the crops they grow. What we're trying to do is ensure we develop an organic system where the growth enhancement scheme, the input subsidy system we have currently operating in Nigeria, organically integrates insurance into the subsidy system. So we already have a conduit where we have access to 10 million farmers. We're trying to build in insurance into that. Some of that will probably possibly be weather index based, others possibly not. But what's more important is, in addition to insurance, we're looking at other alternatives. For example, Andy Jarvis and his team at CIAT have a brilliant decision making model where they advise farmers on when to sow, when not to sow, based on climate model development. So all these options, we're trying to bring in the best ideas to ensure that the farmers, there's equity in terms of farmers' access to the best information. And there's also equity from the private sector's point of view, because it's in our interest to ensure that the private sector comes into the agricultural insurance space. And so to do that, whatever system we design has to be fair both to the farmers and to the private sector. And I believe with the discussions we've had here, the expertise and the technical assistance we're getting from CCAFS and our technical partners, we're very well on our way to ensuring that these aims are achieved. So we thank you very much for coming, and we wish you a happy afternoon. Thank you.